performance, which is also going to be on pastimes of Lord Ramchandra, and there's going to be a few bhajans. Okay, so now we are starting with the class. 5:30 is going to be the Abhishek, and 6 o'clock is a cultural program. And followed by that surely is a Maha Prasadam feast. Thank you so much. So next one. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, we'll sing a song to Lord Rama. Jaya Jaya Ram, Shri Ram Jaya Ram, Jaya Jaya Ram, Shri Ram Jaya Ram, Jaya Jaya Ram, Shri Ram Jaya Ram, Jaya Jaya Ram. I'm actually making another song, so okay. That was the intro. Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram, Patita Pavana Sita Ram. 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 Sita Rama Jaya Sita Rama, Sita Rama, Sita Rama, Sita So, thank you all for coming. We are celebrating today, 2 days early, Ram Navami. All these words in Sanskrit that end in E, like Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Navami, they're feminine ordinal adjectives. They refer to, for example, Navami means the ninth, and it's feminine because it refers to a Titi, which is a day of the lunar calendar. Now, the reason our celebrations come on different dates in the Western calendar is because the Western calendar is a solar calendar, we use a lunar calendar. But all those feminine adjectives, Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Saptami, Ashtami, as in Janmashtami, Navami, they refer to the different days in the calendar. So today is the day of Lord Rama. And there are many interesting things we can observe about this day. First of all, although most of us know the basic story, just very briefly, Lord Rama is a famous avatara. Not to be confused with avatars who help to save indigenous peoples and foreign planets from greedy earthly capitalists. But the original idea of avatar is that ava means downward, tar means crossing. So the avatar is God, or a representative of God, who crosses down from the spiritual plane to the material plane. That is the literal sense of avatara, one who descends, crosses down. So Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita why he comes to this world. That his purpose is clear. Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam sajamyam. When dharma, or the, you could say the moral law, the universal moral law, when it is declining, it is waning, or diminishing, and adharma, which means, you could say moral anarchy, is growing, then Krishna says, at that time, I come myself to this world. Just like, for example, the parents may go away and leave their children at home, and if they get a report that children are going crazy, then the parents come back and settle things. So it's something like that. Krishna creates the world, and it comes with a warranty. So when things are out of control, Krishna comes, and what does Krishna do when he comes here? He says that paritranaya, it's one of those days. Chandelier is still open. Krishna says paritranaya sadhunam, that he says, I come to rescue, to save, to deliver, basically good people. And vinashaya cha duskritam, and to red card, or remove those who are doing evil in the world. And dharma samsthapanarthaya, and to restore dharma, you could say the universal moral law. Sometimes the argument is given that if we study different civilizations, we find that different countries have different concepts of justice, different sets of laws, and so on. But in fact, if we look at societies that are governed by, or where constitutions are formulated by those who have the actual interest of the country in mind, in other words, not a cruel tyrant that takes over and suspends justice, or not I guess America sort of drifting into a type of plutocracy, ruled by the rich, where laws are made not always in the interest of the people, but simply to gratify the greed of those who have the power to buy government. So anyway, these things are all, everyone knows these things. If you listen to NPR for 15 minutes, that's sufficient to become thoroughly depressed. That's the state of government. And if you listen to their fundraising drives, you could almost become suicidal. But in any case, so Krishna comes to... So in different countries, we find that there is a universal sense of justice, which comes in mature societies. For example, why is it that we find in many traditional societies that there are customs, whether it's law or custom? The Greek used to debate these things. What moral or social principles should be left to good customs, to tradition, which should actually be legislated. So without entering that debate, mature societies or mature communities, even in decadent societies, understand that a just society, compassionate society, must be composed of people who are not grossly selfish. Who are not grossly selfish, but who somehow or other have the power and the will to think of the good of others. And therefore, they do not exploit and cheat others or subjugate them. And so, that's why, for example, there is concern in mature societies about the regulation of human sexuality. I'm bringing up this controversial topic just because, because it's an interesting example. As we know, the libidinal impulse or sex desire is perhaps the most powerful human impulse. Of course, it's right up there head-to-head with greed for power and things like that, but it's certainly a very powerful impulse. And it's a general rule for any material desire that the stronger my personal desires, the less I'm inclined, the less I'm able to think about the good of others. For example, let's say someone is actually starving, or they are famished, or they just haven't eaten in a long time. Their consciousness becomes entirely focused on finding food. And someone who really is very, very, very hungry is not going to, like, hi, can I tell you about a really interesting poem I read yesterday? And no, I have to find food. Or so the stronger our material desires, the more selfish we become, the more we focus exclusively on our own gratification. Now, a society which, in the name of free speech, allows the sort of like the unlimited overstimulation, overheating of human desires in the name of advertising, in the name of free speech, what you get basically is an extremely selfish society. And no one should be surprised that in such a society where selfish desire is encouraged at every moment by people trying to sell us some product or service, that there is a growing amount of cheating, exploitation, corruption, even among scientists. I remember a couple of years ago, the government was passing legislation to try to deal with the fact of sort of runaway cheating on published scientific papers. That scientists were so anxious to be published, to further their own careers, to get money, that there was sort of an out-of-control level of faking results in scientific papers. Politicians, that's like beating a dead horse. I mean, we know how honest they are. I saw a bumper sticker that said, invest in America, buy a congressman. So the idea is that a culture, a society which regulates either through custom or legislation, we won't debate that here, human desires, encourages people to be selfless, to be giving, to be compassionate, to be charitable, and thus not to become absorbed in their own base desires. A society which encourages modesty, not vanity. A society which encourages decency, not vulgarity. So these are common principles that you'll find in all mature societies, and these principles, along with higher spiritual principles, Lord Rama came to defend and reestablish. And specifically, when Lord Rama came, there was a very powerful and very bad person named Ravana. And so the basic story is that Rama was a great king, and actually he was a prince, and he was heir to the throne, primogenitor. He was the firstborn son of a great king, Dasharatha. And Dasharatha was going to give the throne to his son, but interestingly, one of the points of this story is it's actually warning us about the evils of polygamy. One thing about Vedic culture is that it was very much real world stuff. In other words, if you look at the history of monarchy anywhere in the world, or if you look at the history of presidency or prime ministership anywhere in the world, what you will find is that more often than not, people in these high positions tend to be promiscuous. And in fact, do not restrict themselves to the bonds of marriage. And so the Vedic culture, there's a general principle of legislation that if you make laws that no one's going to follow, the law only has a negative effect. It does not restrain people, and it actually encourages people to ignore law in general. And so it actually weakens the basic principles of rule by law. For example, let's say you're on some highway in Nevada, where next gas station 120 miles, next human being 80 miles, and the speed limit's 55. And if you're going 85, everyone's passing you and honking. So the idea here is that making laws that no one will follow achieves nothing positive and actually weakens the very concept of law. And so therefore you find in Vedic culture a pragmatic recognition of how human beings actually behave. And so some of the principles we find are there not because the Vedic culture is promoting these ideas or recommending them, but rather trying to contain and deal with them, certain types of human propensities. Prabhupada himself gave this argument when he talked about a liquor license. Liquor licenses are very expensive, licenses to sell liquor, and the reason is, of course, to limit and discourage liquor consumption, not to promote it. And so in the same way, especially among kings, we find polygamy in the ancient Vedic culture, as we find practically almost in all ancient civilizations. Henry VIII did it unofficially, but of course, I guess he was such a devoted monogamist that he killed all his wives when he wanted to marry again. So there's a man, who took monogamy very seriously. So, but in any case, so here's the evidence that the Vedic culture, although it allows polygamy, or did in the past in certain cases, it was actually discouraging it. For one thing, the word for co-wife in Sanskrit, sapatni, feminine word obviously, sapatni, co-wife, if you just put it in the masculine, it means enemy. So the word for co-wife also means enemy. Read it. So then, here's another, and also we find so many stories where people ruin their lives by polygamy. For example, Dasharatha. Dasharatha had two wives, Kaikeyi and Kausalya. Three wives. Do I hear four? No, just three. So, one time he was in a battle, he was wounded, and Kaikeyi, which means that she was a princess from the kingdom of Keikaya, she came out of the battlefield, risked her life, and saved him, and so he told her he would give her any boon. But she decided not to cash it in at the moment. She was very shrewd. And so later, just before Rama was about to be coronated as a new king, she decided to exercise her right to a boon because an evil servant woman had convinced her that Rama was actually going to, when he took power, he was going to endanger her and her son, which was all complete nonsense. But somehow her mind became infected, so she used her boons. How many boons did she have? Two boons. That she wanted Rama, rather than being crowned king, to be banished to the forest, banished to the wilderness, and that her son should become king. It's the truth. Bharata, I'm sorry. That's Hare Krishna. To honor her son Bharata to be crowned king. So this was, of course, was a disaster. And the rest of the Ramayana, all the rest of the story, where Rama is sent to the forest, his father dies of grief. So the first, you could say, the first fruit of this polygamous situation is Ram's father dies of grief. And then the kingdom is thrown into grief. And then Sita insists on going to Ram. She's a very devoted wife, and then she's kidnapped. And then there's a war takes place. And all this takes place basically because of jealousy among co-wives, hence the word sapatna, enemy. We have the story of Chitraketu in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, where King Chitraketu finally gets a son, his only son, and then the co-wives are jealous of the wife that bore him the son, the heir to the throne, so they murder his own son. His one son, they murder. And it goes on and on. Actually, there are similar stories, by the way, about hunting. Kings ruin their lives by hunting. Dasharatha ultimately ruined his life by hunting. He accidentally killed a Brahma, was cursed. Pandu ruined his life by hunting. Parikshit was cursed to die by a hunting accident, or an accident took place while he was out hunting. And so it just goes on and on. So that's one lesson from the Ramayana. Another thing is that important lesson, people are yearning for good government. Every year or every 4 years we go through this exercise electing a president. People get their hopes up and again are disappointed. And so it's so predictable, they actually call it political science. That people will become very enthused and hopeful with the new president, and then his popularity will go down dramatically when they realize that, nope, he's not Lord Rama. So Rama was an ideal king, and this is what Krishna does, or what God does. He comes to the world and shows what perfect government is. He sets the standard. This is another, and in India, basically not only in India, but all around South Asia and other regions, East Asia, Southeast Asia, the Ram Raja, or Ram's kingdom, the perfect government of Rama has been like the Platonic form of government. It's been the standard, the ideal, the gold standard of good government for so long. And it actually provides a standard against which you can measure government. Further, what are you doing? I was going to say, what am I doing here? Further, the example of Rama actually did have an effect. If you study the history of India, like every other country, by India, I mean, it's a modern term, really talking about Bharatavarsha, it was a much larger country that included what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and so on. But if you study the history of India, you find often there was remarkably good government. And this we find in the writings of third-party neutral observers such as Megasthenes, a Greek ambassador 2,300 years ago, or Arius, a Greco-Roman historian and traveler, or Fen Xian, a Chinese pilgrim who was coming to see the holy places of Buddhism in India, and he wrote a journal. So all these, we have these third-party accounts, which we, for example, Megasthenes says India was one country that has no slavery. That in India there's no slavery. And actually, we can say that Bharatavarsha, India spread these principles. Just to give you one quick example, one of the most popular, one of the most beloved monarchs in history was the Emperor Cyrus the Great, the first great Persian emperor. Cyrus is famous because when he conquered Babylonia, he sent the Jews back to Israel, gave them money to help rebuild their temple. In the Old Testament, Cyrus is called a Messiah, even though he's a Goy. He's not Jewish. But still, even though he was a Persian, even though he's a Persian, he's called a Messiah in the Old Testament because of what he did for the Jewish people. Now, Cyrus is famous because in the entire Persian Empire, he abolished slavery. He abolished slavery and declared complete religious freedom. Complete religious freedom. Now, here are some interesting facts about Cyrus. Number one, he spoke a dialect of Sanskrit. He spoke ancient Persian, what is called the Avestan language, from the literature by that name. And ancient Persian is well known by scholars to be a dialect of ancient Sanskrit. Another interesting fact, in his own language, his name is not pronounced Cyrus. It's actually pronounced Kuru. And so the Vedic connections are very obvious. Dharma, Kshetra, Kuru. Kuru is the most famous royal dynasty in Vedic history. So we have a king named Kuru, speaking a dialect of Sanskrit, abolishing slavery, and declaring religious freedom, two principles, religious freedom and freedom from slavery, which already exist in India. So you can see how the story of Lord Rama was not simply the rulers did not simply make a show of following Rama, and meanwhile indulge in all kinds of atrocities and injustice. Actually, they took it very seriously. And so this model of Rama has been a powerful historical force for good government in the world. Another interesting point about the Ram story is that, as you may know, the word Sita is the beloved wife of Rama. He's a monogamous avatar. And in fact, the whole adventure of the Ramayana is based on Rama's love for his wife and his great efforts to rescue her. And so, Sita in Sanskrit means furrow. Furrow, as in, like in a field. And of course, the famous story is that her father, Janaka Maharaj, I hope I get this one right. Her father, Janaka Maharaj, was in the ancient Vedic times when they were going to do a great Vedic sacrifice, or build a temple, actually. You find this also in the ancient literature. The king would prepare the land, plow the land, or level the land with a golden plow. And so Janaka was plowing the land, and he found in a furrow this divine child, a divine female child who became Sita. So, in all cultures in the world, ancient cultures in the world, including the Vedic culture, they recognize the existence of a goddess. In other words, it's not just God, there's also a goddess. The absolute truth is male and female. Together, as we learn in the first chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and there's an almost universal association of the goddess or the female principle with the earth. After all, life comes out of the earth. Vegetation comes out of the earth, and the child comes out of the womb of the woman. So in a sense, this analogy, or this metaphor, that every new life comes out of the female, is born, that was not lost on anyone in the ancient world. And so, here in the story of Sita and Ram, this association is also there. In fact, Bhu, it's interesting, Bhu in Sanskrit originally is a verbal root meaning existence, but it also comes to mean the earth. It comes to mean the earth. And it can mean also a goddess, the earth goddess. So Sita literally comes, her divine appearance. She appears divinely out of the earth. And therefore, in rescuing Sita, I'm not trying to say she's just a symbol. She's a real person. She's Sita. And yet, even in real histories, there can be powerful symbolism. The symbolism does not replace the real story or mean the story never happened, but still, the powerful symbolism drives the story. And so, in rescuing Sita, Rama is actually rescuing the earth. And he's also rescuing Sita, the person Sita. But it also symbolizes he's rescuing the earth. You find this also, for example, in the story of Prithu, another avatar, where he saves the earth. In this case, he disciplines the earth so that it again produces. You have the story of Lord Varaha, who saves the earth. So we have all these avatar stories where Krishna saves the earth. Right, Krishna? My friend there, that girl. The two Sundaris. My God, double trouble. So here we are today. Here we are today on Lord Rama's day, and in a sense, we are called upon to save the earth. I mean, not that we're that strong, but we can be Krishna's instruments. What Krishna calls upon us to do in the Gita is to become his instrument, to offer ourselves as willing instruments of Krishna's own will. And as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, his will is to save the earth. So, on this day in which we celebrate Ram Leela, the activities of Ram, we talk about what he did, we talk about Sita. It's a day not merely to celebrate, eat, and go home. But it's really, the whole reason that these days are instituted, because Krishna says in the Bhagavatam, he has instituted these holy days and that we should observe them. And the reason is because they are opportunities to strengthen our determination, to reorient ourselves, to refocus our lives on what is most important. And if we refocus our lives on what is most important, that should produce activity, greater energy, greater activity, greater determination to serve as Krishna's instrument to save the world. And finally, one last thing I want to say about Lord Rama. Happens in the best of Sampradayas. Something I've already alluded to, and that is in the Vedic culture, and indeed in the divine civilization that Krishna himself has ordained and created, there is an inseparable cooperation and love between men and women. It's not that Sita and Ram have a loving marriage, but everyone else should be a renunciate. To his glory, to their glory. The idea is that to reestablish Dharma in the world, which is what we're called upon to do, as instruments of Krishna, Ram, Sita, Ram. Society, to create a just society, a spiritual society, societies are composed mostly of families. Families are the basic building block of societies, and so there are no good societies without good families. There's no such thing, families are terrible, but the society is great. And so, the fact that Krishna comes, the fact that practically in every avatar Krishna marries, and of course he always marries, he just sort of remarries his eternal consort. They come down together. So ultimately, that is the nature of civilized human life. It's the nature of spiritual society. It's a society of men and women cooperating together, out of duty and out of love. That is what Vedic civilization actually looks like. And so obviously, men and women who are lusting after each other's bodies, sort of upright primates. Men and women who are lusting after each other's bodies are not really going to be a very powerful team to promote spiritual values. It's like, imagine they have this ice skating event in the Olympics, Winter Olympics, where they'll have a couple of man and woman ice skate together. And so, if let's say they're doing their routine and the world's watching, and one of the skaters suddenly, oops, I think that call is for me. They whip out their cell phone and the other flips on their head. So the idea is that, as one philosophy professor of mine once said, you can't walk in the on both sides of the street at the same time. So, in marriage, in the sacred relationship between male and female, the purpose, the goal must be spiritual. Otherwise, relationship based on mutual exploitation or sometimes unilateral exploitation, it's just not a human relationship. If you go on YouTube and see all kinds of nature movies, you can see bestial behavior in all its glory. But among human beings, there are higher spiritual principles. And that's why Sita Ram, they are the supreme personalities of monogamous loving marriage. And so that's, again, to build a spiritual society means to build great families. And the sannyasi's duty, apart from, well, the primary duties are to get free lunch and donations. But once that has been settled, it's actually the duty of the sannyasis to encourage this. Because in Prabhupada's, in our line, Lord Chaitanya's movement, people take sannyas not just to give up the world, but to save it. In the impersonal sampradayas, on the impersonal path, people renounce the world, and actually renounce the world for their own liberation. But as Prabhupada constantly emphasized, sannyas in the Vaishnava tradition is meant to save the world. It's meant to focus all one's energies on engaging with the world and saving the world. And therefore, any sannyasi who is, who just knows what's going on, will know that the only way the world can be saved is by promoting and helping to form great spiritual families. And this is actually a very important point of Lord Rama's descent, something we should learn from it. Anyway, this is, of course, Beat the Clock. So, put the clock very big, right? So that even the most inspired speaker will notice it. So, any questions on these points? Yes?
Regarding relationships and marriage, like you were saying, and you don't want to, just develop a relationship based on lust and things like that, is there still a sense in which spouses should be, it's so much echo in the arm, but is there a sense in which spouses should kind of take care of themselves physically, in a sense, so that they're not dressed horribly or just
or you weigh 3 times as much as you did when we took our vows?
Exactly. Is there a sense of...
Yeah, there is. There is. Fitness is part of Vaishnavism. For several reasons. Number one, the body belongs to Krishna, so don't trash it. To put it bluntly. If you really understand that your body belongs to Krishna, then you deal with it accordingly. Secondly, in our present condition, our present human condition, the body does have material desires and material needs. And there's a difference between encouraging and focusing on material desires and simply satisfying them, whatever is needed, so that one can go on peacefully in one's spiritual life. So, what Krishna says himself in the Bhagavad Gita is that don't eat too much or too little, don't sleep too much or too little. And then he says in all activities, so eating and sleeping are just to give the idea. It actually applies to every physical activity, even includes vihara, which can be translated as yuktahara viharasya, which can be translated recreation, even somewhat physical recreation. The idea being that if two people are married, and they realize that according to Krishna's own teaching, there must be a certain minimum amount of bodily gratification, just so you don't go crazy. And in fact, the example is given in the Bhagavatam. If you're driving a chariot, people used to drive chariots or carriages, horse-driven or pulled things. you cannot simply pull back on the horses because you lose control. The horses may reject your command, and then it's out of control. You don't know what's going to happen. So it's actually, in fact, they found there's an ancient chariot racing manual. They found sort of the border between Turkey and between Europe and the Near East, and from the Hittites, and all the technical terms are in Sanskrit. So they actually knew about chariot racing. I mean, it wasn't invented by Ben-Hur. But anyway, so when you're driving a chariot or a carriage, you have to, it's like a give and take. You have to let the horses run sometimes. If you just pull back on them, you lose control. Same way with the body, because the body in the oldest Vedas is always compared to a vehicle. And the reins are the mind, the chariot driver is the intelligence, the passenger is the soul. This is a very ancient metaphor. Therefore, just as when driving a chariot with horses, there has to be give and takes. You don't lose control of the horse, let them run sometimes. With the senses, there has to be a certain scope. So if your actual purpose in life is spiritual advancement, and you're just dealing rationally with the body you got in this life, that's the hand you were dealt, or you dealt yourself by your past karma, then if you're really fixed on spiritual advancement, but you just rationally come up with a strategy to deal with your body or your mind, that's Krishna consciousness. When we come to the point where we lose our intelligence and think that bodily gratification is the real purpose of it all, or we become shameless, then it's a real illusion. Yes?
I was wondering, Krishna did not practice monogamy.
Did not?
Lord Krishna?
Yes.
He did not practice monogamy, whereas Ramachandra practiced monogamy. So why
monogamy.
Monogamy, sorry. Only one wife.
Yes.
So why is there difference between Rama and Krishna's pastimes?
Krishna does it all. Because Krishna has to do two things. This even includes probably the least popular part of the Ram story, when Sita goes away. And Krishna has two things to teach when he comes. One is, he teaches by example, here's how human beings should live. But if Krishna only or merely taught how human beings should live, people would forget that he's actually God. And so Krishna, first of all, sets a perfect human example, but then he also reminds everyone, oh, by the way, I'm God, and I can do what you can't do. So therefore, if Ram came and simply set this example as a perfect, romantic, loving husband, heroic, who goes and saves his wife and fights to the death to save his wife, people would think, undoubtedly, that, oh, he's a human being, that he's so... that he would, in other words, he's so human-like, Lord Rama is so human-like, that he is a human. And therefore he also shows, for example, when he separates from Sita, that no, actually I'm not a human being and I have no material attachment. The real fact is that Sita is always with Rama and Rama is always with Sita. They're eternally together because they're all-pervading. And so there's no question of separation, but Ram has to show this point. Similarly, when Krishna came at a time when people were attracted, kings were attracted to these things, polygamy, and so, but actually, technically, even Krishna is monogamous. Because if you read the Bhagavatam, what you find is that Krishna expanded himself. He married 16,108 wives. And yet he expanded himself so there were 16,108 Krishnas. So actually, he was monogamous 16,108 times. Yes?
There's a confusion that I get when Lord Ramchandra was actually demonstrating how a kingdom should be run. The best example of what a king should be. And on the other side, the relationship with the wife. So, in order in order to fulfill the needs of his kingdom, the public of his kingdom. Just because somebody questioned the chastity of his wife, he let his wife banish his wife. And I don't see, first of all, he's like Lord himself. Why would he do something like that? He could have very intelligent, he has all the resources and everything. He could have found a solution to that. But there must be a reason why he
Yeah, I think I just explained the reason. That he, of course, obviously, as you say, he used that incident as a pretext. However, he was showing the world that he's not a human being. That actually he's not attached. Otherwise, what would happen very predictably is that people would say, well, material attachment is justified because even Rama did it. So therefore, people would take this as license to just wallow in bodily attachment. And therefore, Ram showed that even though I've displayed this pastime, this Leela, of my love for Sita, in a moment, I can separate because there is no material attachment. So I would say that example with Sita is not necessarily something to be followed by every king. It's just like Prabhupada. In fact, the Bhagavatam says this. In the Bhagavatam, at one point in the 10th canto, Parikshit, after hearing about the Rasa Leela, says to Shukadeva Goswami, that Krishna comes to this world to set a perfect example of Dharma. So why did he... Someone need something? So why did he set this example of dancing with all these girls in the Rasa dance? And what Shuka explains is that he explains actually the distinction between following and imitating. He says that when a great soul, when a great personality does something, and also teaches you to do it, then you should do it. But if the great soul does it and does not authorize you to do it, then you cannot imitate. And Shuka gives the example of Lord Shiva, who drank an ocean of poison and got a little Nilakanta mark on his neck. So, and then Prabhupada points, the idea is that if you may want to imitate Shiva in some of the activities that you find desirable, but then drink the ocean of poison. Or in the case of Krishna, hold up a mountain with your little finger of your left hand. So it's actually over this point that the distinction is made between following and imitating. So in the case of Krishna, there's no injunction. There's no injunction in the Bhagavatam or the Vedas that one should give up one's wife under such circumstances. That if one low-class man criticizes, give up your wife. There's no such injunction. And therefore the conclusion is, this is not a principle meant for all human rulers, but rather it's simply Rama teaching us that he's not a human being. Yes?
We can follow the example of Ramachandra, but we cannot follow immediate Krishna, Krishna's way of living.
We can't follow everything Ramachandra did, but we can. I mean, we couldn't defeat Ravana. Pull out our old high school taekwondo or something. So Ram, it is true that in fact, I mean, what you're saying is true because even the Bhagavatam says, Naradeva Tvamapanna, that he assumed the position of a human king, Rama, and yet he did many things that we can't imitate. But still, he acted like a human. Anything else? Time's up. So, thank you all very much, and happy Ram Navami. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Krishna, I'd like to thank His Holiness Hridayananda Maharaj for a wonderful speech. Thank you very much. Now you see our temple room is so crowded. really need a new temple. So we have a model for our new temple in the back there. Everybody please go and see the model. And if you need more information about our new temple, we're going to have a table downstairs by Masa Ganga and Sundarananda Prabhu. So please contact them. They can just tell you more about the new temple. Hare Krishna. So we'll follow our next program.